Operator Syndrome, episode 56. We're coming back to me. I'm going to have to talk about myself some more, talk about the transition process out of the Army and the Ranger Regiment. Um, Again, I don't listen to past episodes, so I'm having to remember what I talked about. I do remember talking about submitting college applications while deployed. Um, I remember being really concerned whether I would be able to get into college. um, in high school, I applied to college. I got into college then. I actually got offered an Army ROTC scholarship, a 3 year. Couldn't get that 4 year, but I got a 3 year. And then I turned that down to enlist, like the true genius that I am. Uh, there was a war going on. I couldn't stay in school any much longer.
Yes.
So I remember applying, writing essays, in between missions, I'd be sitting there writing college admission essays. Um, I got hung up on, I don't know why, my background is I'm a Protestant, right? Uh, my my family was practiced the Southern Baptist tradition.
Yeah.
My grandfather, he was actually like I don't know. I don't think he was a minister. He wasn't like an ordained minister, but he was like the head guy of his church, sort of like the lay leader, I
Deacon.
guess. Yeah, deacon for this little Southern Baptist church in Northeast Ohio.
Yeah.
So that was sort of his thing, and when I was way younger, we'd go to church with him there, and and uh, and later on in life, that was just kind of like the flavor of Christianity of Protestantism um, that I was used to. So that's what we did. Even when I was in the Rangers, actually. Now I'm going to get sidetracked, but I'm going to talk about this. So even while we were in there, when I was in the Rangers, um, I would go. I remember now that I went to this little Southern Baptist church in Columbus, Georgia.
Yeah.
Um, After I got tabbed, and after like a lot of the anxiety and the worry about being a new guy had sort of passed, and I could rest easier on weekends when I was on in my off time. I remember at a certain point I was like I felt compelled to go to church, and it's not like I grew up very religious. My father was an army officer. We moved around a lot.
Yeah.
We were the family that went to the post chapel on the army base, like for the big. We hit the big things,
Right.
Easter Sunday,
Christmas.
Christmas time. That was pretty much it. And then if my dad, felt the spirit, some random Sunday we'd go, but we were never consistent.
Right.
Um, but while I was at Fort Benning, at a certain point, I just started going to church. I looked up like the nicest part of Columbus, Georgia, and I found us. Looked on the map, like literally on a map, and I looked for like a Southern Baptist church, and I just started going there, and I was like, and I did that for maybe a year and a half or two before I left. And I was just like the quiet dude who sat in the back, definitely, way back in the back, and sat there. And I became, I imagine I got to know people's names. I couldn't recall anyone's name right now.
Yeah.
Um, but I would just go there, and I think I did it. I don't know that it was necessarily a spirituality thing completely. It wasn't like I hadn't even been baptized. So technically I wasn't even a saved guy by then.
Mm.
I,
Yeah.
I think I think I just wanted to be somewhere as far away from work as I could be.
I get that.
I think that's what it was. Is like it was escapism, really.
Yeah.
It was like harkening back to,
Yeah.
some church experience in my youth, but it was just like, what's
Yeah.
the opposite of being a ranger who's constantly deploying and constantly afraid for his life?
Yeah.
Is I'm going to this small, only civilians in there, right?
Right.
Like this nice small church, and I just sit in the back, and I can just blend in there, you know. I think that's what it really was.
Was your
So
was your mother? She was Korean. Which did
mhm.
she practice Buddhism, or was she of any spiritual ilk?
she the Korean side of the family, they are Buddhists, and I'm not that well versed on that side of things
Hmm.
as I could be, so I don't want to speak out of turn.
Right.
I suspect that I don't know what all it takes to practice Buddhism.
Oh man.
My guess is that from like a ceremonial perspective,
Yeah.
they're probably a lot less rigid on like show up at this time at this place in the right uniform type thing, like Christianity often is.
Yeah.
you
Well,
know,
it depends on there's about a million different forms
sure,
of
yeah,
Buddhism, and
right.
man, some are hardcore, some are just like in Japan. They say they baptize their kids Shinto,
Mm,
they get married Christian, and they bury their funerals are Buddhist.
interesting.
They got a hodgepodge, yeah.
I
But
know I do know that when the Korean side of my when we die off that they they do a lot of the Buddhist stuff
mhm,
for the burial for
yeah,
sure. And honestly, that's an area I've been thinking to myself I'd like to tap more. I mean, that's half of me, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
um I'm interested in finding the time to
Yeah.
tap into that. But
Anyway, I didn't mean to divert you.
no, no, because that's something I've been thinking about. So I appreciate the and it's important. Like, yeah, I don't know. It never occurred to me. Like, I'd always just thought of myself as some kind of Baptist dude.
Right, right.
So, so yeah, I did that. Anyways, that whole sideline was to say that when I was looking at colleges, I really got wrapped around the idea of going to a Catholic university and going to specifically a Jesuit university to get that experience. I don't know why.
Hmm.
Um, I didn't even do that much research. I
Yeah,
just I felt like my thought at the time was, okay, I'm going to go to school. I'm going to go to school. I want like a well-rounded experience. Um, and I was just vaguely aware that the Catholic universities have more of a requirement around theology and philosophy. At least that was my take at the time.
yeah, yeah.
So that's what I was applying to um, at the time, and I was also aware that smaller class sizes, all that type of stuff,
Yeah, sure.
and I felt like for me to be successful, um, I was also worried about how I would perform in school. You know,
Hmm.
I was like, it was a
Really?
different thing, right? It's like, well, like clearing rooms is a lot different from sitting in a classroom and doing projects,
Right.
and I did okay in high school, but I didn't do great. Anyways, so that was kind of my focus at the time as I'm getting out, is applying to those schools. But it turns out it wasn't. Now I have hindsight. Like schools want to accept you, right? Except
Of course.
for the extremely selective, universities. Most schools want your tuition money. So I
Okay.
didn't need if for the schools I was targeting, I didn't need to be that worried about it.
Right. Right.
I didn't need
They're
to be
happy to
that.
take your money.
Yeah, they're like, oh yeah, yeah, come here. So anyways, so I got an acceptance. So I was accepted pretty pretty early on. So I definitely knew as I was getting out that okay, I'm going to college and I'm going to this, this college in the Midwest, the small
Yeah.
college in the Midwest. So I knew that. So that was one good thing. You're getting out. They always say like have a plan. Well, I had a plan. I got accepted to this college, and that's what I was going to do. Um, you talked about it before,
Yeah.
but as you're getting out, um, the last big training exercise that I participated in was at the beginning. We came back and I participated in our airfield seizure. So the thing we always did for as a first major thing that we'd do. Um, and I participated in that. Um, and then after that, I started to like pick up the responsibilities of the quitter who's leaving, you know? So,
Yeah.
you talked about it before, but it's like suddenly, like I was like, I'm a first platoon guy. I'd always been a first platoon guy in BCO. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, it's like, well, first platoon is doing this thing, but hey, Patrick, you don't
Oh,
need, you're not doing this with us, so you're going to do this other thing. What's
yeah.
the other thing?
Stand
It's,
up.
it, for you, what staff duty? It's staff duty. I became in charge of like all the RFS guys, release for all the guys that we were kicking
Oh,
out.
right.
Is one thing that landed on me.
Oh, nice.
So, and if anyone's listened to this, any of these episodes or most of them, we talk about how the Ranger Regiment kicks folks out. You all don't understand. We really kick out a lot of people. Yeah, there is. I dare someone to come up with a unit that kicks out as many folks as the Rangers do. It's it's you would think that they enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like
It's a tradition they have to
it's a
uphold.
it's a tradition. Like we kick guys out,
Yeah.
and so there is always a group of dudes at any company that's just waiting to get out. Like we don't let them wear the special PT uniforms anymore.
Oh, man.
They're constantly on CQ or staff duty. They're doing details, cleaning stuff up, or this or that. They're not a motivated bunch at that point.
Stripped
Uh,
of all dignity.
and in a lot of ways, for me, I was a guy who was getting out in good standing,
Yeah.
um, but I felt like
Mm.
one of those guys.
Yeah.
I was stripped of my identity. I was at that point I was like an interim squad leader, but like I was a leader in first platoon, and now I kind of felt like I was getting RFS. You know, like
Yeah,
so
exactly. Well, it rubs off,
yeah, and not to say that guys who are getting RFS are like turds. Some of them are.
Yeah.
Some are turds, and that's why they're getting kicked out. But the the extent to which the Ranger Regiment kicks people out, like there are good dudes who just make a mistake, or
Hmm.
they have a lapse in judgment, or they're unlucky
Yeah.
and they end up in that boat too, you
Yeah.
know, and um and so I was like their leader. So I was their leader, and that was, like you said, it was rubbing off a little bit. Just like the attitude is just the feeling of being like you're there with the rest of the company, but you don't feel like you're part of the company, and that was tough. And I had noticed that I was having trouble sleeping in the months, I'd say
Huh.
6-ish months before I got out. Like I noticed that I couldn't sleep anymore. And before that, like I slept like a rock all the time.
All the time. Yeah.
Always. I never had problems with sleeping. I mean, if I could be counted on to do one thing, it'd be to fall asleep and rest
Yeah.
well, right?
Same
Um,
here.
but like about 6 months out, I found myself restless, and only now looking back do I identify that, oh shit, it's because I was worried about getting out,
Yeah.
and I was also dealing with already losing my identity, right,
Yeah.
as a Ranger NCO. That's who I was up to that point. That's all I'd ever been. That's what I came in as a kid, and I was
Right.
still a kid. You're still a kid when you get out. You don't know that yet, but
Well,
um,
yeah, sure.
I was stripped of that identity, so I was losing sleep. Um,
Mhm.
uh, another thing that we hadn't talked about it before with the other deployments, but um, guys will medicate. It's a story as old as time, right? Like bad things happen, guys start
Mhm.
drinking. Bad
Yep.
things happen, guys do drugs, and and everyone's heard those stories. There's another way to medicate yourself, which we don't really talk about or acknowledge all that much, but like food, like
Uh,
medicating yourself with food.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I don't know if that's like it may be like a regional thing or like a culture, sort of like a family culture thing, but like comforting yourself with food is definitely a thing, and that's something that that I was doing as well. Um, like in special operations, it's almost like I'm not going to say like it's glorified, but to have a drinking problem or a drug problem is almost like respectable compared to the dude who gets chunky.
Oh yeah,
You
yeah,
know what I mean? And
yeah.
and
In that
probably
culture. Hmm.
and it has to be because, well, you can be drunk and you could do cocaine, but
Hmm.
but you know that's not necessarily make you operationally a liability, right?
Right,
Like you'd still
right.
probably maintain your physique mostly. Depends
Yeah,
on what, like if you're a real alcoholic, you're probably not doing it off of beers, or it's
yeah,
probably liquor. You're not getting the
right.
extra calories, but like so, I would see throughout my years in the Rangers, I'd see dudes who plumped up here and there,
Mm-hmm.
or who yo-yoed and that type of stuff. And I was
Yeah,
one of those dudes. Like I'd never if you again, if anyone heard like the first stories of me coming in, I was like a
yeah,
chunky dude coming in.
yeah,
Like that was one of my problems.
yeah,
So, and then throughout the course, like I wasn't a drinker, I didn't turn to drugs, but like when things were rough, like I would eat, and so
yeah.
I would yo-yo.
Right.
Um, and then towards the end, so I'm losing sleep, and then I'm eating a lot.
Hmm.
So when you get out, um, and that's just a random thing that I'm remembering, but
Yeah, yeah, I would say, you can get endorphins from a lot of different angles.
mhm,
Yeah, it's a feeling. It makes you feel good, and like
mhm.
a lot of people like struggle with sweets and chocolate and stuff. That really kicks up the endorphins. So at the end of the day, it's those chemicals that make us feel better, and it can come from many different forms.
Yeah. And I started to say it, but I didn't get there. Like definitely as a child, um, again, the culture was like around food. Something's going wrong. Oh, let's go get you an ice cream. Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah,
like turning to food, like I especially feel like the Midwest, the South, like that's not
yeah,
an uncommon thing. Like that's like built into the family. It's like eat your
yeah.
troubles away, man. Like feel,
Yep,
mac and cheese like that's good. Life might suck, but like eat something that tastes good. So anyways,
totally.
um the transition. So at the time I was getting out, 2009 mostly. I got out right at the beginning of 2010. um uh there was a program called TAPS at the time. I don't know what they have now. It was a program, that it was a program, a transition program, but it already had the reputation of just being really terrible, a waste of time.
It has a very ominous name, taps.
Taps.
Like you play that with your head.
Transition
Yeah.
assistant. I don't know, but
Transition to death. Let's play
but the
tap.
but the thing was, and it's a common complaint about the program is the people teaching that program. And no offense to them, I mean no offense, but they're not the people. It's always a retired senior NCO who's leading that program. It's like they
Yeah.
talk like it. They tell you, first off, they tell you that they were a sergeant major or master chief or whatever the
Uh-huh.
Air Force has, but they tell you, I did 32 years, blah 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 blah,
Oh
and it's
yeah.
like, what do you have to tell me about transitioning? Like
Yeah.
I'm a
You-
22-year-old going to college. Like I've got like two lifetimes ahead of me in the civilian world. Like what,
right.
and so they lose credibility instantly. And again, no
Oh
offense to
yeah.
them, they're just dudes getting out and getting that contract work with the government, right?
Right.
But it's not helpful.
No.
They're not starting from a position of authority on the
Yeah.
subject. And the other thing is like, just like any other army class, there's a piece of paper, at least for me, there's a piece of paper I signed in day one, and I knew that I was done. I didn't need to show back up, and I didn't. I didn't go back in there. If you looked on paper, it had a lot of the stuff, the content that one would need when transitioning.
Hmm.
Talking about resumes, talking about like how to dress. There were even mock interview things. So there was like a lab component to the
Yeah.
lecture,
Right.
right? But I knew that, what I figured was, I'd rather just like sham the rest of the day than to sit through
Yeah.
this. is
Yeah.
mostly is mostly what it was. It is laziness. I'll say that's 80% of it. But then it was justified by, like, does this guy really know what he's talking about? Like, I
Yeah.
really don't
No.
think so.
No.
Like, I'm not that far off from being a civilian that hearing this dude, you know, with his polo tucked into his slacks, like, I don't think this is with the phone clips. I don't think this is the guy who's gonna like make me successful. No offense.
They had
Um,
that in the Navy too. That we had, it must be a military tradition. It was like that out processing. It was a retired master chief or something, and he just ranted the whole time about how he hated civilian life. Oh, great, great, how
yeah,
great the military was. I was like,
and
what?
and I can't say enough. God bless retired senior
Yeah,
NCO. We
yeah,
need you out
absolutely,
there, but
absolutely.
stick to range control, stick to the other things. Like let's get folks. And by the way, who's successful in the civilian world is going to teach a TAPS class too. So I get it. I get
Right.
it. I get it. I get it. But anyways, so I didn't go through that, and I also figured, well, I'm about to go to college. Like, so college should. I'm getting back onto the traditional path. My assumption would be that I'd pick up a lot of the things I need to know in college. That was my idea. So I preferred to just sign in and then go do whatever I was going to do for that day.
Right.
Cam. So I did that. One interesting thing did happen during the transition, during the sign out process, transition. I forgot what you call it.
Out
Clearing,
processing.
yeah, out processing, clearing is what we say
Yeah.
in the art, clearing.
Okay.
So you have to go talk to the reserve component
Oh,
guy. So I go in there, and I'm just gonna like sign, get the paper stamped, and go. This guy gives me his spiel, and I end up um, uh, uh, enlisting into the National Guard. The dude did it. He got me. So the
good.
deal is I got out this is 2009 mostly when I'm having these conversations. For my peer group, stop loss was a very real thing to us. Um, I knew guys, even in the Ranger Regiment, who got stop lost. It wasn't just conventional infantry dudes who got stop loss before getting sent over for a 15-month. Like everyone was getting stop lost in the years that I was around.
That's
So,
that's tell tell us
well,
what
what?
that
Okay,
means.
yeah. So stop loss is where. So the real story is you go to enlist, and what people say is, well, I enlisted for 4 years, I enlisted for 6 years. Everyone on their first contract, at least at the time, again, my usual disclaimer, is that actually you're signing an 8-year commitment. Everybody is, period. You're signing for an 8-year commitment to the military. Your your paperwork will say how much you are initially planning to do active duty or guard or reserves. But
Right.
then the rest of the time, you're in some kind of reserve status. So
Hmm.
I signed up for a four and some change, almost 5-year contract. Um, but the small print was saying, but you're in a reserve, some kind of reserve status for the rest of that time. Um, Most of the time, and even now, when you get out of your active duty time, you go into something called the IRR,
Hmm.
individual ready reserve, I think.
Independent ready reserve or
Something
something.
like, yeah, something like
Yeah.
that. Which basically means you're mostly a civilian, but they reserve
Yeah.
the right to call you
To
back
call you up.
or
Yeah.
to serve out up to that 8-year point. So, like I said, I knew guys. I actually knew guys who got stop loss. I knew a dude who had all his stuff packed up. He was one of our FOs. It was the time we got surged to Afghanistan the first time. One of our FOs, his name was Coutchie. I can't
Hmm.
remember his first name. But he was like a cool dude. He was an FO. He went with us over there. He got stop loss. He came back, and then he left. He ended up becoming a cop in Southern California, like a motorcycle cop, and he actually died in the line of duty.
Oh man.
He got in someone ran over him or something like that, which is
Jeez.
messed up. But he was a cool dude. Um, and Anywho, distracted. But so what was I talking about? Now I'm
Going to
thinking
college, kind
going
of
to yeah. So that the task. Oh, the reserves.
the
So
reserves.
I go in there, and this guy tells me, um, uh, he tells me, hey, if you do, he lays it out in front of me, and it's sort of a concrete argument. He's like, listen, the state you're looking to transition to, they got a program where you do like the bare minimum tour there, like a year and some change, and you're non-deployable. They can't deploy you,
Hmm.
and then you do that year and some change, and then the rest of that 8 years is gone. You don't have to worry about it. You're cleared of it. And I'm like, okay, so why? That sounds great. What's the catch? He's like, the reason we're doing that is because that state wants the funding that comes from accepting an active duty. So it's like a funding thing.
Right.
At least this is what he told me, and I bought it.
Right.
So I was like, and I was thinking to myself, I was married. So I was thinking to myself, well, we get to keep like some semblance of TRICARE health insurance. And I guess I get a couple, a couple dollar bills coming in once a month. And it's only once a month and 2 weeks
Yeah.
out of the year. It can't, and for a year, it can't be that bad.
Yeah. Right.
So I did it. So I enlisted into the National Guard then. Um, and so we'll talk more about that.
Okay.
But but so I go to leave. Leaving's weird. I'm leaving at the same time that the company is getting ready to deploy again. In fact, um, the block leave before their deployment, I'm doing staff duty like the whole time. So I'm on rear detachment while they
Mm.
go and do their block leave before they deploy. And they come back, and then my last day is like the next week or something like that. So pack up. I got this little apartment in Columbus, Georgia, somewhere like exit 7 somewhere. And I, I remember going to clear out the last day. You get if in the army, you got to get all dressed up. So I'm wearing my pins and patches. I got the beret on, going to clear out. And at the time, they're still using really old barracks for these personnel, shops, base personnel shops, administrative stuff. And I'm just going through the list, and eventually I get to a point in the list. I'm sitting down in front of some lady. She prints off a piece of paper. She hands it to me. It's my DD 214. It's the
Yeah.
magic paper that releases you from active duty. And she's like, "All right, that's it. You're done. Have a nice day." And I was just sitting there, and I was like, "That's it. That's it. I'm done." She's like, "Yeah, you're done." And she smiles, and she's a pleasant lady, and she's doing her thing. But like, that's it. I
Yeah.
was like, there's no like balloons and confetti doesn't
Right.
fall from the ceiling. Like, there's no
Yeah.
congratulations. It's not her job to tell me congratulations, but it was just like, that's it. Like, you just gave me the piece of paper. And I remember being really stunned by that moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just like, that's it. Okay. That's it. Okay.
You, you've given so much to your country, and you put your life on the line, and then they're just like, "Here you go, see ya." Not even a cup of coffee and a handshake. It's like there's the door.
Yeah.
It's kind of insulting, you know.
I, yeah, yeah. I wouldn't have, I didn't expect it from her. Like I said,
Yeah.
she was a
Right.
she was a very pleasant lady,
Doing a
and
job.
she's doing her job, and she said, "Yeah, that's it. Have a nice day." But yeah, I was just like, "What, all this stuff, and then that's how it ends." That's like, wow.
Right.
So you got to go back. This is a little funny. So you got to. So you have to take. I guess you have to drop off that form, or the clearing form. I guess is what it is. You got to go back to your battalion and drop it off in their S whatever S1 personnel section.
Right.
So I go to drop it off, and like my platoon sergeant is in there, and or my ex platoon sergeant, my former platoon sergeant, because I'm out now, right?
All
I go
right.
to drop it. I'm like, "Hey, here's my thing." They're like, "Okay," and then he's in there doing something, and he's like, I think it's he's like "Are you done?" I'm like,
Mhm.
"Yeah, I'm done." He's like, "You're not gonna make it on the outside."
Oh,
And no.
man.
And I am confident that's 99% joking. I'm I'm confident
Yeah.
because otherwise it'd just be so outrageous.
It,
It'd be so outrageous to still be funny if it even if it wasn't.
yeah.
But I was like, all right. I was like, all right, dude.
Oh, man.
Right there, I was like, that's like quintessential army
Kick in the
moment.
teeth. Yeah.
Army moment. And it didn't really bother. I truly think it's funny, and I truly think that it was made in jest. He wasn't like the guy like real in touch with his feelings and that type of stuff. So
Yeah.
few
Well,
of
there's
us
guys
are.
out there that would say that. Seriously.
But that's the other thing. There are dudes. Knowing him, I gotta imagine it was
Yeah.
mostly a joke.
Yeah.
But uh, and then I remember packing up the truck, I had a truck like everybody else has a truck, pack up the truck in the U-Haul. And then I do remember it just being like the sweetest moment because
Mm,
Columbus, Georgia, you've got this highway. Well, you've been there, but it's got this
yeah,
main highway that goes north, running north and south, and it goes
yeah,
right down and it ends at Fort Benning, whatever that
right.
highway is. And if you go north, it'll take you to Atlanta and all
Yeah,
points to your future. So, but I remember like the sweetest, like packing up, getting in the truck and just starting to drive north. And it was like exit 10. There's like the last sign overpass that kind of marks Columbus, Georgia.
yeah,
Like, dude, I'm out. And,
yeah.
and it was a bright, beautiful, sunny day. And I was just like, that
Nice.
was one of the best feelings
All
ever.
right.
That moment leaving.
Feeling free.
Yeah.
Yeah, just feeling free again, man. It's kind of, you know, being in the military is kind of like somebody, well, somebody else owns you. I mean, it's really weird. It's kind of like in sort of maybe indentured servanthood.
Yeah.
You sacrifice your constitutional rights when you go in. You fall under a new set of laws called the Uniform Code of Military Justice. It's man, I mean, it's a big deal for those. If you're a military person, you know that, and
Hmm.
yeah, there's nothing like that feeling of elation that, oh, I can go wherever I want and
Hmm.
do absolutely whatever I want right now,
Hmm.
and nobody's going to tell me or write me up for it, or yeah, it's pretty huge. Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. I can almost feel that feeling right now. Like just exactly like you said. It's like ultimate freedom. The military, we've probably said this before a million times, but indentured servitude, call it that, call it like a prison sentence. Like the two people who know the date they're to be released,
Yeah,
prisoners and people in the military.
yeah, that's
They know the exact date. Oftentimes they'll tell you the countdown,
yeah,
right? Like, 253 days and a wake up, right? Like
yeah.
down to that low. And there's a reason for that.
Oh yeah,
There is a reason. It's because there are similarities. Um,
for sure.
you know, the military gave me so many opportunities to so many great opportunities. Um, met some great people, some awful people, also some great people. I'd say more great people than awful. Um, and I wouldn't. We've said it before. I wouldn't do it differently. I'm glad I did it. For certain people, I think that it's a good opportunity. It's a
Mm,
there are a lot of great things you can get out of it, but I think across the board, everyone says like it is a good day when you leave, though.
yeah, it is.
Like that almost, even for folks who do the 20 plus, like it is a good day when you finally sign out.
Sure.
But then you transition into like the next phase, and um I was not I was not at all ready for how tough of a time I would have transitioning out. I
Mm,
was not I didn't have at the time. We were talking a lot about like, this was on the heels of the recession of like oh 07, oh 08, that
hmm.
time. There was
Right.
some economic uncertainty. So that was a big thing at the time, like physical, like making sure your physical ailments and issues were documented. That was a big thing. But the headspace piece was not a thing anybody talked about.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I think now it's more common knowledge that for whatever reason, it's really hard to mentally transition out of the military.
Mm,
Um, but at the time, not and I was completely blindsided. Um,
yeah.
we're going to get more into it, but um, I thought I was going to do all the right things. I had a plan, I had family, I had this and that, and I still had a really tough time.
Yeah.
And I attribute a lot of that to just not being aware that what was about to happen to me,
Uh-huh.
right? Like I
Huh.
mentioned how I was losing sleep beforehand, but I never added it all up and understood that it's because you're about to get out. It's
Yeah.
because you're not really a ranger anymore, dude. It's like
Right.
these are the things that were bothering me, but I wasn't even aware that that's what was bothering me.
Right.
So um so yeah, I guess we'll talk about that more. We'll talk about the National Guard. and I've got some shit talking to do, but I've also got some praise to give for
Okay.
the National Guard
Yeah.
folks. And what I really need to talk about is the stuff that really bothered me, triggered me, if you will,
Yeah.
to use a term that everyone loves. And what was really bothering me is I check out, I move on with my life, and I've got some baggage from that by itself, right?
Sure.
Combat stress, losing friends, the usual. But then I get out and just people keep dying, and that weighs on me and it bothers me,
Sure.
and it bothers me that it bothers me, and so then it's like a vicious cycle. But we'll pick that up in the next episode.
Yeah, hopefully that will help some veterans out there if you're having similar struggles, if nothing else, so that you don't think you're going crazy and you're alone and you're the only one going through this. It's that's kind of what we want to do with this podcast. Is just help other veterans in whatever small way or great way we can. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Okay, well, we'll do that in the next one. Thank you all for listening. As usual, we'll catch you in the next one. Bye.
Ciao.